news reading activity. This comes from Nature, which is a pretty legitimate source, we would hope. My main issue here, I'm going to talk about this headline, which is, I think, highly sensationalized and just, another example of journalism playing into sort of the industries that it covers and being sort of free PR for certain industries. And I have nothing against technology that helps people who are physically disabled. Obviously, this is a good thing, but I think it does a disservice to people's notion of science, and in particular, the way that people think about technology right now, and AI in particular, or machine learning, and how it's sort of going to affect our lives in the future. Okay, so brain reading devices allow paralyzed people to talk using their thoughts. Let's start with brain reading devices. First off, that sort of implies that these devices are reading thought, which they are not. Okay, the article itself is actually pretty well written, and does not include a lot of sort of misleading information, but there are some points here that I would like to draw your attention to. Brain reading implants. I don't think that's the correct wording here. Implants that measure neural states, I think, would be a better way to describe this. Right? This is not implants that are reading your thought, reading your brain. These read certain things about the brain, but calling these brain reading implants is, I think, the equivalent of saying that when your lips move because you talk, that your lips are reading your brain, right? Your lips are interpreting signals from the brain, but do your lips have any access to sort of what your internal thought is as you make certain words? No, right? So I think that's basically the main argument you could make here, right? And this technology, or similar technologies, has been around for a while. Say you want to move your right arm, right? You raise your right arm. You do this. There's some sort of mental activity associated with raising your right arm, and we can measure that mental activity and make some sort of association between a certain kind of mental activity and raising your arm, right? That is not new, okay? In this case, what we're doing is trying to find some kind of association with a certain mental activity and then what would normally produce sounds with your mouth, if you can hear, or if you're deaf, this would be then not your lips, tongue, things like that, but would be your arms and facial expressions and things like that. Okay, so regardless of modality, you are thinking about what you want to say, but it is not reading your thought. It's reading the externalization of your thought. It is reading in this case, the individual sounds that you're trying to make. And so these are people who once were able to speak under regular physical conditions, and so have retained that sort of information, right? So they still know. In the same way that if you didn't have any arms, you could still mentally activate the thing of moving your arm, even if you don't have an arm, right? And so that's what they're doing here. Even though they can't move their lips in this case, you can still activate the mental process that is associated with moving your lips. Determining what sounds a person is trying to activate. There are a finite number of possibilities. In the same way that we could isolate the difference between lifting your left hand and your right hand, we could isolate the differences in mental activity between those two actions. We can isolate the mental activity that's associated with the 44 sounds or phonemes in the English language. Of course, it's going to be a little trickier because there's 44 of them as opposed to 2, and any sort of information that we're getting from the brain is probably going to be, at the very least, a little fuzzy, right? So this is not discrete information. There's a little bit of, right, more or less in these sorts of calculations. But what we want at the end of the day is a yes or no answer, right? Is this person trying to activate the T sound versus the P sound, right? So that kind of question. So brain reading devices allow paralyzed people to talk using their thoughts. I'm going to talk about thoughts here now, right? The idea here, everybody talks using their thoughts, first off. So this is kind of pointless to say this. I would say, if we were to try and make a more accurate and not sensational headline, brain reading, right, is not going to work because that makes people think that it's reading your brains. Sensors that can read brain activity allow paralyzed people to talk without using their mouths. Might be a better way of putting it, right? They're talking using their thoughts is sort of that everybody talks using your thoughts. But thought is not the same thing as speech, right? You can think the same thing and have it come out in Spanish or Greek or sign language. So I don't think that it's really about using your thoughts, but using pre-existing neurological connections to phonemes. Again, that's not going to be no one's going to click on that. But I do think it's important that we don't sort of propagate this idea that there are devices out there that actually read your thoughts. Because that would be a really impressive thing if that were true. And it's not. And I don't think it's quite possible that it will never be true. So when Elon Musk and company talk about Neuralink and things like that, I would say that unless they have some sort of technology that the entire neuroscience community is unaware of, that they have somehow been able to keep secret, then no, what they claim to be doing is not going to happen on a sort of theoretical level. And it's important to dispel these myths as they come up. And for journalists to not be sort of free PR for these emerging technologies, although it's hot and interesting, and there's a lot of talk about this right now. You look at the way that journalists have treated things like ChatGPT, for example, and I think we've really done a disservice to science and the idea of what our relationship is with technology. Most journalists, are like, wow, look at what this can do, and this is going to eliminate these jobs and things like that. And that's just sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. They are basically inviting then hucksters to come in and try to create technologies that eliminate certain jobs, saying, yes, because we can do this, we should do this. But imagine two headlines. So a brain implant is able to identify the mental activity associated with raising your right hand versus raising your left hand. It can accurately identify brain activity as being associated with raising your right hand or raising your left hand. Okay. Imagine that as a headline versus a brain implant is capable of determining whether someone wants to go on a cruise or someone is afraid of spiders. Okay, that to me would be a much more sort of sensational headline. And if it were true, that would be, a huge breakthrough, right? Whereas the left arm versus right arm thing is basically already established at this point. But so when we say brain reading, I think it's important that we understand, we say reading signals from the brain. And thought, I think it's important that we avoid using words like thought when we talk about these sorts of things, because it's not the thought that it's reading. It is the externalization of that thought through phonemes, through sounds and language. So it is identifying sort of the pieces that humans create to express their thoughts, but it is not identifying thought itself. And I'm not here to poo-poo on technology helping people, especially, situations like this with, handicaps. But I do think it's important that we are careful with the way that we report these sorts of things, especially in the current climate. So just a little thought on that. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you are all able to discern truth from hype and reality from bullshit going forward. And hope you're all doing well. Thanks.